got ourselves debut novelist Katie Lumsden. Katie, how are you feeling? Book is out
Hi.
there circulating. You doing all right?
Yeah, it's a bit strange that the book is now published, I suppose, but it's quite exciting too.
Yeah. Well, this book is, if I understand, I mean, it's kind of, I would say it's the culmination, but it's the latest manifestation of a kind of a lifelong obsession you've had, not just with books, but with a particular era. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's right. I love reading a lot. I've loved reading, a very, very long time. I read a lot of books. And one of my sort of areas of interest is Victorian literature. I love Victorian literature a lot. So I read a lot of it, and I have been reading a lot of it for a long time. And my novel, The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, is sort of inspired by a lot of the Victorian novels that I love, and sort of, yeah, a life filled with reading lots of Victorian literature and kind of learning about the Victorian period and Victorian history, I suppose.
What is interesting about Victorian era in particular? Strikes me as such a uh, well, I don't know. You tell me. What do you find interesting about what specifically? Why is it? Is it the restrictions to some degree? The um why
So
that
I
time?
think I think it's a lot of different things. I think one thing I find very interesting is that the Victorian period was a period of huge social change. We talk about it as one homogeneous thing, but it absolutely wasn't. It was sort of 64 years of massive social, technological, cultural change. And that I find really interesting. And especially the sort of technological change and how industrialization and urbanization and kind of machinery, how that changed culture and society is fascinating. And I think actually is really interesting for us as modern readers, because technology is changing our world a lot very, very rapidly. And the Victorians were kind of going through a similar thing. And they sort of the influence of that on the things they wrote about and thought about are really interesting.
Yeah.
I also find the kind of social and cultural history of the Victorian period really interesting. You talk about the restrictions, but one of the things I really like about the Victorian period and Victorian literature is that they were constantly battling against the restrictions of their time.
Oh,
What I love about a lot of Victorian books is how much they challenge the kind of social status quo. I find a lot of Victorian literature sort of really proto-feminist in really interesting ways. I think a lot of the Victorians were fighting against class restrictions, gender restrictions, social roles, in this way that is really fascinating. And they did live in this sort of hierarchical, restrictive
sure.
society, but actually they were battling against it all the time. And that
Yeah.
sort of like quiet rebellion going on in novels is fascinating. And also the Victorians, they wrote a lot of books, and they had this sort of massive reading culture and produced a lot of sort of
Right.
fantastic works of literature, which are just, yeah, a joy to read in
Well,
many ways.
all right. So you read, you love it, you just can't get enough. You found your home, your intellectual home, but reading is one thing, writing is another. How soon did you say, I want to take a crack at this on my own, this storytelling thing?
I mean, I've been writing for a very long time. I've probably been writing since on and off since before I discovered Victorian literature. So I used to write stories as a child, and as a teenager. And then when I was like 14, I decided I was going to be a writer. So I started
That's
getting
it.
up early before school to write in the morning before school. And I've
Wow.
just sort of done that ever since. So all the way through school, through university, through, my working life, I've got up earlier than I need to in the morning to write before everything else I have to do. And there have been various projects that have come and gone. And then, yeah, settled on The Secret of Hartwood Hall has been the first one that, yeah, has got out into the world, I suppose.
Secrets of Hartwood Hall, for our viewers. Oh, I love this book. It was
Thank you.
really a page turner for me. Beautifully written, romantic, a little creepy. You put a lot in there. There's a lot of stuff that you bring
Yeah.
into there. So talk to me about, had you started other novels? You must have. You must have started some novels
Yeah.
before this.
I have many novels on my computer that will never be seen. I counted. I think the Secrets of Hartwood Hall is the 13th novel I've finished.
Oh,
But
oh, oh,
but the
oh.
other 12, some of them are dire, terrible things that I wrote as a teenager that will never see the
Okay.
light of day, and some of them I will return to. But yes, I wrote, started, and finished lots of other novels before The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, some of which were historical, some of which were not historical. Um, but yes, it takes a lot of
Wow.
time to get published. So there we
It
go.
can. It can. And so, what do you think was different about this book? What it was it What do you think? What did you notice something different about it when you started it? Was it just book number 14? Here we go. Let's do another one.
I think there are a few things. I think one is that as a writer, the thing that makes you better is practicing writing. So actually, if you write a lot of books, everyone will be better, hopefully, than the last. And I do feel like a lot of writers write a lot of practice books before they write a book that is successful or that is commercially viable, I suppose. Because one of the things I had a few novels so I got an agent like quite a long time before The Secret of Hartwood Hall, and I had a few books that went out to publishers but didn't kind of get any traction. Right. And I think it was because they didn't necessarily have that like commercial hook or that sort of commerciality, I guess. Whereas The Secret of Hartwood Hall, I had written quite a few books and I had been struggling to get published, and I thought quite hard about what would be a commercially viable novel. So I also work in publishing myself. I'm an editor. And so that has given me sort of I don't know, knowledge about the industry, especially in the UK, and sort of what books are commercially viable. And it probably helped me think, okay, so if I got this book on submission as an editor, what would make me think maybe we can sell this to people? So there's half of me where I sort of feel very artistic, and I, had a whale of a time writing it, and it's a complete love letter to Victorian literature. And then there's another part of me that did manage to put my business brain on and think, well, what is a story that I think people will be interested in? What is a story that I think people will want to buy and want to read? And I had so much fun with the kind of Gothic stuff in The Secret of Hartwood Hall, but also I think the Gothic is something that really appeals to people. And that was kind of what initially led me to sort of try Gothic, I suppose, because the stuff I'd written before hadn't really been Gothic.
That is good. Now, I would think that, we want our work to be commercially viable, but it's tricky because, of course, commercially viable means people want to buy it, and who knows? We don't really know what people want to buy. We have a sense of it. And so you do. So when you're writing, you know what you like. You don't actually know what other people like. And yet somehow you were able to thread that needle a little bit. That must not have been, I don't know. That seems tricky in a way, but obviously it didn't, it's clarified something for you, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not all conscious. Some of that is unconscious stuff. I read a lot of historical fiction myself, just like contemporary historical fiction that's coming out. I read a lot of it, and that probably helped as well, because I know what I would like as a reader of historical fiction, and I know what my friends would like as readers of historical fiction. So that kind of helps as well, both sort of the general knowledge of what people like to read. I have a booktube channel, and I watch lots of people on the internet talking about the books they like to read, and all of that kind of stuff helps as well, I guess.
I do think if you love a form of writing, your love of it turns you into both a fan and a creator of it. And so you can sort of tap into the fan as the theoretical reader, but it's really I think it's really yourself in a way you're still kind of writing for, but just maybe you allowed yourself to admit the fandom kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think as an editor and a reviewer, you think about what you love in a book, but you also think about what doesn't work for you in books, and that can help you with your own writing massively. And sort of the thing that I naturally find hardest as a writer is plotting. And I worked with on my own, and then with my agent and my editors, I worked really hard on the plotting of The Secret of Hartwood Hall to make it pacey, because I felt that was needed, but I also find that's much harder. I feel like if left to my own devices without thinking about things, I would just write a novel in which everyone sat around drinking tea and nothing else happened.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Which could be delightful, but I also think sometimes you need to plot. So yeah.
Very good, but I'm not quite done with you, Katie. I want you to finish the following sentence for me. I want you to put your thinking cap on. Think of all the books, all the writing you've done in your life, all going back to when you were just a little girl. And if all this writing has taught you anything, it's taught you what?
About writing or about
life? I mean,
life.
Just taught you something.
One thing that I really love about writing every morning is that it is really, really nice to begin your day doing something that you really like. And I feel like whether you write or not, or whether you have other hobbies, actually getting up in the morning and before you have anything else to do, spending time on a hobby is really, really like rewarding. I feel like it's good for you mentally. So there we go. That's what I've learned from writing, I guess.